Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to the Jefferson County Energy Lunch. I'm Brian Goldstein, and I MC this every month, third Tuesday. Thank you for joining us. This is a gathering of local folks that talk about energy policy and energy trends. And I'd like to ask everybody to turn off their cell phones, please, so that we don't have that interrupting us. Program information for this energy lunch can be found on the Local 2020 site. So that gives you an idea of what's upcoming, what our past speakers have been. And all of these talks are recorded. That's why I'm using a hand mic here, is not only so you can hear me on the PA, but also so that this audio gets recorded on our monthly recording. So if you've missed one and want to go back in the past, they're all archived on our site. And that's on the Port Townsend Journal.com website, which is linked into the Local 2020 site. So if you just Google, for Port Townsend Energy Lunch, you'll find us. We also have a listserv that many of you are on already, and this is a way for us to talk about energy topics online. It's really an email listserv, and if you are interested in joining us on those, and they average 3 or 4 emails a week, it's not too bad. You can talk to Ellen, and she'll get you signed up with your email address. Without our local sponsors, none of this would be possible, so I'd like to thank each one of them. Alaska Power and Telephone. I know Bob is here today. All right. Frederickson Electric. Huber's Inn. Thank you, Letitia. Appreciate that. The Port of Port Townsend. Port Townsend Paper Company. Thank you, Kevin. Power Trip Energy. And Sunshine Propane. Thanks, Robert. So those are our 7 sponsors. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, please let us know, and we'll tell you what's going on with sponsorship. Some of you don't realize that there is a steering committee that puts these on every month, and currently there's 4 of us that are on that committee. Myself, Rick Van Auken, whom some of you have met. He's in Brooklyn, New York. And so he doesn't come to these for obvious reasons. And Steve Tucker is a 3rd member. And then finally, Dana Lee, who lives in Oregon, is a member of our steering committee. And he's here today, and I'd like you to introduce himself, and then he can tell you a little bit about some of the other reasons he's up here today, actually.
I'm here because I've been associated with your wonderful program since its inception, and every weekday, I get to spend some time with my partner, Rick Van Auken, talking about what's going on with the Energy Lunch program in Jefferson County. So you're always on my mind. I'm here this month, because I'm particularly passionate about the opportunity afforded by the subject matter, and Stephen Crolius is going to talk to you about that. But before Stephen comes up, I wanted to kind of look back a little bit. And many of you, know Steve Ham and the role Steve played in getting this project off the ground in the beginning. And for those of you who are regular listeners to the Compass program, I encourage you to listen to the interview with Bill Wise and Judy Alexander and Steve Ham that's going to play tomorrow and a couple of other times this week. I think that you'll find it inspiring. And the thought that I take away from that early involvement with the Energy Lunch and the effort that many of you in unofficial capacities put forth to make things happen has really brought you to this point where you're in a position to make more things happen, provided that you continue to be inspired, that you realize that if you're committed, you'll find a way to do the things that look like they may be impossible. And I just want to charge you to renew your commitment to be inspired, that you've got an amazing community spirit here that will lead you in ways that I can't begin to imagine, but I think will lead you to a future where you can be proud of your carbon footprint, you can be proud of the local jobs you create, you can be proud of leading the counties in the state of Washington and beyond into an energy regime that is unique and yet possible. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Brian. Thanks very much.
Speaking of our carbon footprint, at 2 p.m. today following this presentation here in this room, there'll be a workshop with the topic Reducing the Carbon Footprint of Transportation in Jefferson County, and that will be chaired by Cindy Jane from the local 2020 Climate Action Group. So I hope you can join us for that. Next month, our upcoming talk in January, Virgil Beeston from Powin Energy in Tualatin, Oregon, like Palelep. And is going to talk about a review of the latest developments in battery energy storage technologies with a focus on how additional excess electricity can be collected and stored. So I know a lot of us have been interested in that topic, so come to hear that in January. So for today's speaker, Stephen Crolius is a business strategy consultant, currently a vice president with the Alliance Consulting Group in Boston. He was with the Clinton Foundation from 2006 until earlier this year, and he spent the last 4 years there as the director of the transportation program for the Clinton Climate Initiative. During that time, the program focused on alternative transportation technologies that could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80% or more, including electric, biomethane, and ammonia-powered vehicles. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Stephen Crolius.
While I was with the Clinton Foundation, we had a very close partnership with the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group. As the name suggests, this is a collection of 40 large cities all around the world. And you, I'm sure, can't read the individual city names, but the point of showing you this map is that to show you the spread of the cities. I think there were 5 C40 cities in North America and 14 in Asia, proportionate with population. The C40 Cities group was started by Mayor Ken Livingstone of London in 2005. Mayor Livingstone believed that climate change is, needless to say, real, but also a real crisis, and that a serious crisis. I'm sure he believes that still. He felt that he discovered that as a mayor of a large city, there are actually a number of actions he could take to reduce the greenhouse gas footprint of the City of London. And somewhere along the way, around 2005, he had the inspiration to say, well, what if I could get my other mayors of large cities together and we could have a group and we could trade experiences and lessons and best practices. And so he did that. He started the C40, although when he started the C40, it was called something like the Mayors of Large Cities, Climate Discussion Group or something. It became the C40 in 2006 when my boss at the Clinton Climate Initiative, the chairman of the initiative, had a meeting with Mayor Livingstone, and they agreed that the Clinton Foundation would come in and really take Mayor Livingstone's idea to the next level. And they conceived of not just, a dozen cities, mainly in Europe. They said global, and the 40, not necessarily the biggest, but 40 of the main or major type global capitals. So that's where it came from, but the point I want to make is it was conceived in this spirit of crisis and urgency, but most of all, this idea that because of the crisis, because of the urgency, mayors as political leaders should go beyond business as usual, just kind of doing the same old things and a little bit different and a little bit better. Not going to cut it. It was going to take a serious commitment to bigger, better, faster measures that could address the crisis. One of the members of the C40 is the city of New York, and they exemplify the spirit. New York takes a backseat to no city. I've certainly learned that in my years of working with New York. They take a backseat to no city and feeling like they're ahead. and they're in charge. And sure enough, in the late 90s, some officials at the New York Metropolitan Transit Authority got taken with the idea of hybrid diesel-electric buses. And the theory is quite clear. We all know the theory now because we've got Priuses, and you take some of that energy that you would otherwise dissipate in braking, and you store it somehow, and then you use it, when the next time the vehicle goes into motion. Physics it can't be argued with. But hybrid electric buses in the late 90s really didn't exist. Daimler, the famous, German automotive company, responded to an overture from the city of New York and said, "Yeah, we'll work with you on, putting hybrid buses together." And so they had to have a North American subsidiary, happens to have a plant in New York State, Orion, O-R-I-O-N, like the constellation, Orion Bus. And one thing led to another, and New York City was the first jurisdiction in the world, maybe not literally the first, but in the top 3 to actually have any hybrid buses at all. And they were really the first to implement them in a serious way. And they were able to demonstrate, and it was not an easy process. I heard war stories, and there was, the first generation of buses had a certain set of problems. They fixed those. The second generation had other problems. They fixed those. Eventually, they got a bus technically that worked. Get to 2006, Clinton Foundation, the C40, the team that I was fortunate enough to lead, and we said, it looks like there's a really good technology, technically very good, but the economic case has not been established here because the buses were still being purchased in small enough volumes that they had not squeezed out, they hadn't learned to manufacture them, the designs weren't optimized, the manufacturing wasn't optimized, the plant scale was not, nothing was optimized. So we worked, my colleagues and I, we consulted with a variety of players and convinced ourselves that, in fact, this was a technology not just with a technical case, but with an economic case, if we could mobilize the volumes of buses that would be needed to squeeze out all the excess costs. This graph is our graph, the result of our work, and it actually, there's a lot of things going on here. First of all, I'll just mention that the $R sign, that's the symbol for the Brazilian real. This was a slide we happened to put together. You'll see why it's in Brazilian currency in a minute. So the first bar there is the life cycle cost of a conventional diesel bus. And there's about, it's close enough to 2 reals to the dollar if you want to get it into dollar terms. It's close enough to 2, it's not exactly. But somewhere $1 million or $1.2 million is the life cycle cost of a diesel bus. And that consists of capital, which is the blue at the bottom, the upfront price of the bus, the fuel cost, the red bar in the middle, and then the maintenance on the green on the top. The number is how many kilowatt hours of batteries on board. And of course, that number is 0 for a diesel bus. There's no energy storage batteries on board a diesel bus. We conducted an analysis of other electrically oriented type of bus technologies, all of which somewhere between 2006 when we started and 2011 when this analysis was actually done, all of which came into existence in that period. So a normal hybrid diesel electric bus, the kind the picture I just showed you. That has about 15 kilowatt hours of energy storage on board. And in fact, as you can see, a lower life cycle cost than a regular diesel bus. And we've got behind this slide are all the assumptions about how many dollars per gallon of diesel fuel. I want to say it was probably $3.50 per gallon of diesel fuel. Sure enough, you know, when you plug in either current reality today or something that was foreseeable in terms of the direction that bus prices were going, there it is, with a fair margin of improvement, of benefit, reduction in the cost, the life cycle cost of the hybrid electric bus. And you know, in 2007, we would have stopped there because the other things didn't really exist yet. But because we're doing it in 2011, we said, all right, well, so that's, hybrid bus is great. But the best it's going to probably do is maybe reduce fuel consumption by about 40%. That other 60%, you're still burning diesel fuel. So for us, our mission, Clinton Climate Initiative, you know, we're 80% at least before we feel like, you know, we're on target. And so let's not stop just with hybrid electric buses. And that's what motivated the other three bars, as we said, let's compare that hybrid bus cost position with three other things. On the far, your far right, it's regular straight up battery electric buses. They, you know, they charge overnight in the yard. They go out and do their thing during the day, and then all on batteries without recharging. Then they get back to the yard at night. As you can see, that takes a lot of kilowatt hours. That's what that 324 is. Next to that is a plug-in hybrid. So now it's the basic hybrid bus idea, but some of the electricity can come from the grid. So you can plug in at night, you can charge up your 90 kilowatt hours, and during the day you can judiciously use that 90 kilowatt hours in order to optimize your fuel consumption. And then the one in the middle, called intraday charging battery electric, that's it's only electricity. There's no hybrid. It's just battery electric. But instead of having to have 324 kilowatt hours on board, we're only putting on 54. And the way we're getting through the day is we're charging the bus every so often during the day. One of the early systems of this nature runs out in Pomona, California. It runs, I've ridden on it, it runs 20 minutes out from the depot, 20 minutes back in. It charges for 6 minutes and does the same thing again, and it does that all day long, and it can do that for 54 kilowatt hours. Now, it's very interesting because why is that the lowest life cycle cost on the graph? It's because, on the one hand, you've gotten rid of the whole internal combustion engine. So you've got savings in fuel, you've got savings in maintenance. Two, you don't have all that huge quantity of batteries, so you don't have to buy the batteries up front. And each of the three bars on the right, each of those has a battery swap out in the midlife of the bus built in, because that's what batteries do today. Hopefully, batteries in the future will be able to last an entire 12 or 15 year life of a bus, but we wanted to be conservative in our modeling. So this is what we found, and we did this working with a team of industry folks, and we feel pretty confident in it, and it was a revelation. No one expected that this was going to be the answer. Different people had different perspectives. People thought it was maybe an evolution. We go from a hybrid diesel to a plug-in hybrid diesel to pure battery, and somehow that was the natural evolution. Not so. So this was the result. Now I want to shift gears slightly. The gentleman on the right is Mayor Gilberto Kassab of Sao Paulo, Brazil. You might recognize the gentleman on the left, and the gentleman in the middle you might also recognize as that's Mayor Bloomberg. Mayor Kassab was a star in the C40 system. He really, as much as any other mayor amongst the 40, he really took to heart Mayor Livingston's idea about a crisis and the need for urgent action. And he did, while he was in office, he did a number of extraordinary things. His signature achievement was the passage of a climate law, 2009. So I want to have that sink in a little bit. This is a city passing a climate law. And some cities have climate policies or climate statements like, oh, climate change is a terrible thing and we're committed to do something maybe that's going to help. No, Mayor Kassab's climate law was very specific and precise on what was going to happen. What I've excerpted here is the transportation provisions. And the first one is reduce fossil fuel used in public transit by 10% per year, with all city fleets running on renewable fuels by 2017. So that's pretty clear. 10% per year, not improvement every year, 10% every year. And running on renewable fuels, not sometime or not in 2050, 2017. Now, you might wonder why 10% a year and why 2017? Where did that come from? With all modesty, we were part of that. And without overstating, I would not want to overstate our role. We did not, no one on my team sat down with Mayor Kassab directly. What we did is we talked all the time to people in the Sao Paulo Transit Agency. And it was a dialogue. We were saying, hey, we were saying, hey, and they were saying, wow, interesting. Let's talk about what this might mean for us. That filtered up, and there's no way Mayor Kassab would have put his reputation on the line with something like this if this was crazy. And every once in a while, we know that the politicians get out ahead of technology and technical people. When they do, it's very embarrassing. There's critical that Mayor Kassab knew that there's this technology coming along, and I focused on electric technology. There's also alternative fuel technology, which we also were talking about. So he and his people developed a fair level of confidence that by 2017, not only would there be the technology to take them to fully renewable fuels, but it could be done in an affordable manner. Because, in Brazil, they're in a different part of the industrialization cycle than we are. It's kind of fun to go down there because there's a sense of, people's productivity is coming up, and people have a greater sense of possibility. I think we feel a little bit beaten down with, gridlock in Washington and, taxes and what have you down there. But even so, it was critical that the technology could be affordable, that it was not going to double the transit agency budget. And in fact, Brazil is still not as wealthy as a country as our country, and so it mattered. Bus fares mattered. You might remember there was some political strife down in Brazil last summer. And it was at its root, the thing that got it started was an increase in bus fares, having nothing to do with Mayor Kassab's program, just a badly handled fare increase from the transit agency. So this is our model. This is the model that we worked off, and I think it's perhaps applicable here in Jefferson County. let's say you have a goal that's dependent on new technology. You know, the goal might be doing something about climate change, or the goal might be economic development. For the technology, for new technology to arrive and to take root and to be taken up in a big way, that's a question of capital, mobilizing capital. And so if you want to make the transition, if you want to traverse the path from a technology-oriented intention to mobilization of capital, our experience is that it goes through this axis between public sector leadership and a business case. And the arrow between the two has two heads on it because it's not sequential and it's not one step or two steps. It's a constant interaction between public sector leadership group, and it can be multiple public sector agencies, typically is, and maybe a big project, and what's happening over on the business side, which can be represented by, and often is, by multiple businesses with, can be competing technologies or what have you. So if the term public-private partnership is coming into your brains right now, that's very apropos. That's what needs to happen here is the public sector having a thought and the private sector feeding that thought with what's possible, and the public sector maybe challenging and saying, well, I think it's a little early for us to get involved here and somehow support this technological direction. Maybe the private sector then says, yeah, but if we could do just this, we could demonstrate this, and then we could get from here to. So that's the kind of dynamic which I know, there has been some of here in Jefferson County, and what I'm about to say is maybe there's room, and maybe it's time for there to be a whole lot more. And if so, capital can be mobilized, capital can flow, and you wind up with results. So now I'm going to shift gears again, having laid that foundation, connecting the dots. This is the title of my talk. The dots are topics that have come up in the energy lunches over the last 3 years. And I was able to read a number of documents from previous discussions. I watched a couple of videos and talked to folks. So I'm sure I'm not fully informed, but I've really tried to understand previous things that have been on the menu here. So there's a dot. I don't know if in the back you can read it. Bonneville Power. So the great work by the Public Utility District and buying the assets of PSE and doing the deal with Bonneville Power. So that's certainly, on the energy picture, that's certainly an important dot. Biomass cogeneration. So for example, you got the paper mill here, certainly processes a lot of biomass. There was the cogeneration project that got proposed and permitted but not built. But is the permit still valid, Kevin? So it's a concept for sure. It's a dot. Photovoltaic. Rick Van Auken is very proud of the fact that on a per capita basis, there's more photovoltaic here in Jefferson County than anywhere in the United States, if Rick is correct in his assertion. But either way, proportional, I guess there's a lot, and that's wonderful. Wind energy. I know it's still in the evaluation stage, and maybe it'll pan out, maybe it won't, but it's also on the map. And then we had, and then ocean energy as a possibility, since you're right here on the ocean. Tidal, wave, ocean current. I mean, there's a lot of different possibilities, all of which can be, grouped under the concept of renewable electricity generation, obviously. Okay, so then you can take that renewably generated electricity and you can use it directly for transportation. Right now, I happen to be doing, I've got a couple of projects going, both in California, both relate to electric vehicles, electrification. One relates to electric school buses, the other relates to charging infrastructure for electric cars. So I'm a huge, strong believer in, electric transportation, and I know that's a really powerful connection there. The other thing, of course, you can do with renewable electricity is you can split water through electrolysis, and you can take the resulting hydrogen and put it through Haber-Bosch synthesis, and you can make ammonia. And that ammonia can be used to power transportation, at least in the near future. That's a serious possibility. But the other thing is ammonia is, as people who have been to the energy lunches know, more so than almost anybody else in the United States, ammonia can be used as an energy storage medium very well because it's storable and manageable as a liquid, unlike electricity, which is storable at relatively high cost, and unlike natural gas, for example, or hydrogen, which is, as gases are relatively expensive, difficult and expensive to store and transport in that form. So ammonia as a storage medium for electricity opens up the possibility of, I'm calling it electricity arbitrage. And I understand that a gentleman by the name of Jack Robertson spoke at one of the early energy lunches in 2010, and that's his idea. He called his particular version is called hydrogen hubs. But the general idea is electricity arbitrage. You take cheap electricity that's produced here in the Olympic Peninsula or in the Pacific Northwest, you turn it into ammonia, you transport the ammonia, and you turn that ammonia back into electricity someplace where electricity is relatively expensive. That's the idea. Then, here's one that I think hasn't really come up very much in the energy lunches, but it may be worth a thought. Anaerobic digestion. And probably the main thing, the place to start and think about anaerobic digestion is your wastewater treatment plant sludge, which right now is composted. And fair enough, but if you can get some energy out of it, put it through anaerobic digestion, produce biomethane, there should be, I neglected to draw the arrow, but pretend in your mind there's an arrow from anaerobic digestion right down to transportation. Or you can take the gas coming off your anaerobic digester and you can put it through a steam methane reforming process, and that creates a lot of hydrogen, and the hydrogen can then go into Haber-Bosch synthesis and make ammonia. And then there's the idea of biomass gasification. Here we are up in the part of the world where there is, large amounts of biomass out, and that some of which is being, harvested and used for different products, and there's quite a bit of waste biomass that possibly could be better utilized. So biomass gasification, from your gasifier, you can take the hydrogen and put it through ammonia synthesis, or alternatively, you can build your gasifier so that instead of making ammonia, it makes methanol. And once you have methanol, you can make dimethyl ether very easily. Those are really important, methanol and dimethyl ether, in any discussion of alternative transportation, because unlike ammonia, those are good to go today as transportation fuels. They're just as green. They're both carbon-containing fuels, but if you're starting with waste biomass, then they're just as green as ammonia. Methanol is already allowed into the national gasoline supply. You already can blend in up to 6% methanol, and you don't need anybody's permission to do that. It doesn't happen. It's a long story, but it could. Dimethyl ether is a little more complex story about the regulatory side of things, but it is the key thing here is that Volvo, the Volvo Corporation, which among other companies owns Mack Truck, they're going to sell a dimethyl ether engine in 2015 here in North America. So, there's the demand side for the fuel. Dimethyl ether is, among other things, it's a very close to a drop-in fuel for diesel. You need to make some adjustments to your diesel engine, but they aren't. You don't have to take the whole thing apart and start over. You change the fuel injectors and certain aspects of the fuel system, and you're good to go. So take a step back, look at the whole thing, and say, this is a part of the world. You all are the citizens of a part of the world where there's an above average set of opportunities for alternative energy. And I know that economic development is on the menu here. Economic development is on the menu most places. So, but most places don't have, in the energy sphere, a set of opportunities like this. And so this is a long, long way from a strategic energy development plan or strategic economic development plan. This is just connecting the dots of some things that have been discussed. But I feel like there are a really rich set of possibilities here. And it would be wonderful if Jefferson County and Port Townsend were able to step up and really explore the possibilities that exist here, and maybe it could they could be the basis of a really pioneering role into the alternative energy future. Oh, let's not leave out biochar. If you do your gasification process just right, a byproduct is biochar, and I know that there's a biochar is on the menu here. I don't know if the biochar gentleman or his folks are biochar. Biochar, really important. I know you're thinking about for filtration, but if you're into biochar, the broader importance of biochar as a soil amendment. If we're going to be using our waste biomass, which means we're not reintegrating it back into the ecosystem of the soil, then biochar is an important, I think maybe a critically important part of the puzzle. So just to end on that slide that I just went through before, just to reinforce the idea that you've got some leaders here in the county on the public sector side who have been supporting the Energy Lunch activity and clearly are interested in moving forward with perhaps bold ideas. You've got some businesses here, same set of values. This morning, Dane and I met with Kevin Scott, and we saw Roger Hagan here earlier. And earlier before that, we met with Bob Grimm. So, and I had some phone conversations with some other folks. So, there seems like not only are there a rich set of technological possibilities, there's also a rich set of possibilities on the social the social and the human side, the human resources side. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I'd be very happy to continue the discussion with questions or whatever makes sense.
Thank you, Stephen. So for those of you who are new to the process, this microphone, please wait for Ellen to bring this to you. If you have a question, raise your hand. And speak right into the microphone so we can record it for the online recording.
I take bribes.
I have a question in regard to Sao Paulo.
Yeah.
They're 4 years in. Have they reduced 40%?
Have they reduced?
Reduced because they were going to go 10% a year, and they started in 2009.
Yeah, gotcha. So they just did the audit they did the audit through 2012, so we don't have the results of 2013 yet, and they are approximately on track. However, when you scratch the surface in any story like this, it's not this linear progression. There's right now what I'm told from my former colleague down there is that the new mayor's heart is in the right place, but he appointed someone to run this program, the climate law program, who's doesn't seem to be either effective or maybe he's got some distractions, other interests maybe he's serving. So there's not a good feeling down there right now if you happen to go down. But there's still optimism that over the next few years that they're going to get to where they need to go.
Just a question, please. You were talking about different sources of energy, and you were mentioning the ammonias, and you were mentioning methanol. I don't know if you mentioned ether, but methanol for sure. And I would like to ask you, please, the byproducts of something like methanol versus ammonia, the green ammonia.
When you say byproduct, you mean once you burn it, what comes out?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So all three of those molecules, dimethyl ether and methanol and ammonia, they're all very simple molecules, which means that they tend to go. The chemical transformation that occurs when each is oxidized is directly to water, or in the case of methanol and dimethyl ether, carbon dioxide. Water and carbon dioxide. The opportunity to form, for example, particulates almost doesn't exist. One of the special characteristics of dimethyl ether is that there's no carbon-carbon bond. So you don't even have a particulate matter consisting of two linked carbon atoms. I'm not going to say it's zero, but the emissions profile from dimethyl ether engine is way below any standards in Europe or the US. So, yeah.
It sounds like this is a wonderful vision for being able to keep our car culture, which is something I'm not in favor of. But can you give any guesstimate of how many BTUs or kilowatts we would need to continue the car culture the way we use it right now? All of us driving wherever we need to go. I appreciate you used the bus and transit as your opening theme, but this applies to any kind of engine motivation source. So what a guesstimate on your part as to how many BTUs or kilowatts we're using now and how many we could generate this way? And gosh, it seems like we might end up cutting down our forests to do this, but I just want to pick your brain on that one.
All right, there's lots of ways I could answer that. Let me try this one. The study that a lot of people look to and consider to be credible and authoritative is the billion ton study that was primarily sponsored by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Said that maybe we could meet something like 30% of our transportation needs through waste biomass, but not more. We came upon, the study was done in the mid-aughts. We came across it pretty early in our thought process, and we said, it's probably quite misguided when you hear anybody, any notional expert talking about, we need to really focus on biofuels. I cringe when I hear that, because when you say, often when they say that, it's as if it's the answer, and it's not. Our view is that, when I say our view, I should say, when I was with the Clinton Foundation, our view was that we should look at waste biomass as a transitional fuel. And we should look to fuels that can be made essentially without limit as really the staples of the new energy economy. And those fuels that can be made essentially without limit, the likeliest ones are hydrogen. And that's really the key, right? Is you can, if you have some source of energy that you can turn into electricity, then you can split water all day long and the water's just going to cycle. So you're not limited by how much energy you have, because we're being bombarded every day from the sun and other sources with unlimited energy. So it's hydrogen. Only hydrogen is not the best solution in gaseous form. Hydrogen's a lot better and easier to work with as if you combine it with nitrogen, which of course is, for all intents and purposes, infinitely available in the atmosphere, and make ammonia. That's one of the many reasons why ammonia floats to the top of the pile of energy alternatives.
Thank you, Stephen. I come to about a third of these energy lunches and walk out with about 30% understanding of what's been said. And I'm going to leave today with more like 80%.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not an energy wonk like a lot of these other folks are, but what strikes me a lot about what you've shared is the underpinnings of the relationality of the model. Like with that double arrow, public sector, business case, it's like you're talking about cooperation and collaboration between the public sector and businesses, and I really love that. I'm part of Local 2020, and the first two words of our mission statement is working together towards local sustainability, and we've had some significant successes in that regard with respect to starting the PUD, like Dana was talking about and Brian was talking about at the beginning. I'm curious if you have any comments, advice, watch out for pitfalls of that relational model in a business sector that's used to hierarchical power, top-down stuff, where decisions are made without collaboration. They're made based on money and financing and what's best for the company, not the public. And if you have any words of wisdom for our community, if we're going to try to develop some kind of model that is relational, where the public partners with private business, private investors, invest in things that the public benefit from, how can we do that best? Like, how do we put our best foot forward that way? Do you know what I'm saying?
I do, but, and I don't want this to sound pandering, but my answer is, I think you all are embodying kind of a best practice right here and now, honestly. To have a group of this size come out for a topic of this nature from I think if Rick Van Auken is right, there's something like 28,000 or 30,000 people in all of Jefferson County. So in the course of today, I'm going to probably interact with, just about everybody who's in a position to make a big contribution toward, an alternative energy strategy for Jefferson County on the public sector side and the private sector, the public sector, and the citizens. Your 2020 group and climate action. I guess that's part of it. And anyway, I mean, sincerely, I really feel like there's no silver bullet or secret sauce or anything. It's coming out, having some folks willing to put some series like this together and then coming out. I don't think there's anything, certainly in my limited expertise, put it this way, I'm not aware of anything that's more powerful than that. Sorry.
Hi. I just, you're using electrolysis and then making hydrogen and then making ammonia and then turning it back into electricity. What sort of efficiency on that round trip do you think there'd be? I would think there'd be rather low efficiency recovering the energy. Do you know what that would be?
So electrolyzers, the best electrolyzers these days can get around 90% of, you put in 100 units of electricity and you'll get out energy value of hydrogen, worth 90, 88, 90, okay? So that's on that part of the trip. And then if you're going to do the arbitrage thing and, for example, make, ammonia up here and send it, for example, to Southern California, some energy loss in the transportation process. And let me acknowledge that I don't have a figure to attach to it. Then on the other end, whether through new engine technology that's just at the point of being, it's getting toward commercial status, or fuel cells, solid oxide fuel cells, for example, which are commercial. You can wind up with north of 50%, somewhere, let's say 50, 60%, turning that energy embodied in your ammonia back into electricity. So if you do 0.5 times 0.9,
45.
yeah, and that's, I know, that's your best case. You're probably not going to actually achieve, and then you have your transportation in between. So now, if you put in a combined heat and power system on your electricity generation, then if you can do something beneficial with that heat, you can get a little more efficiency. So, but that's the order of magnitude.
Thank you.
Yeah. What about this gentleman?
I really appreciated the two-way arrow as well, and I likewise am a member of 2020, and there we have three goals that have to do with community, economy, and ecology. And I don't see a place for ecology here, and it gets kind of the question that Leticia was asking about, what happens when you burn any of these, what is the outcome there? And so it seems to me that there's a bottom line for private business, which is profit, and a bottom line for the public sector, which is revenues. What is the bottom line for the ecology contribution? I see it being a constant interaction as a principle, a constant, not sequential, you said, it was a step-by-step, a constant interaction. That's the way you described it. I see that as well, but
Yeah.
Is there some kind of, in your former life in the Clinton Foundation, is there some kind of an ecology component that is part of this process?
We went through a three-step evaluation process for any technology that was presented to us as something worthy of our attention. The first was environmental, or what you're calling it, what I think we're maybe meaning the same thing, just environmental impact and social impact. So if it was going to have more than trivial negative consequences for either of those, we just put it aside, because maybe we would need to come back and re-examine those if we couldn't find anything that would work with other alternatives, but that was never the case. There always seemed to be there are alternatives where you don't need to have a trade-off, a negative trade-off for environment or social. The second was technical, and the third was implementation. Sorry, the second was economic, which embraces technical. But there had to be a prospect that it could be competitive at some point under some realistic scenario. And the third was implementation. Can we get there from here? Can we start from where we are and get there? And hydrogen, we took a long look at hydrogen. We were really true believers in hydrogen until the evidence got to be so high that it was going to be problematic. It's problematic all the way along, but it's especially, not least in the problems, is just the implementation path. You really can't get there from here. California is the jurisdiction in the whole world that's making the most serious attempt, and I don't think they're probably going to see much success because of the implementation issues. But as I say, we would really, I don't think in anything that I'm talking about here, I don't think that there are serious, unaddressable ecological or environmental issues. I don't think so. You heard me say, and I was careful to say it, waste biomass. I understand, I take it to heart. I'm an ecology guy in my heart. And I know we don't want to be, cutting down good trees for our energy needs, but I don't think we have to. Yeah.
To follow up on the question here on the efficiency, since you're familiar with both ammonia and battery technology, can you compare those? What are the percentages of efficiency for battery technology from AC to battery to back? And also, obviously, batteries have an issue with leakage. Is there any sort of leakage associated with ammonia storage?
Hold that second question, because I won't remember it after I answer the first. So by the time you take various small losses into account of getting your electricity into your battery and then back out again, a ballpark is going to be, the round trip is, going to cost you 10%, plus or minus 10 to 15. The issue with batteries is just that they are relatively expensive. They're relatively quite inexpensive. Even we've been looking at battery prices over years, and they've come down a lot, and they'll come down some more. But even then, they're still pretty expensive, and not scalable. It's not like you'll get a little break if you buy a huge quantity. You'll get a little break on the price. But if you put in an enormous ammonia plant, then you'll see quite an economy relative to a small ammonia plant. So.
And I assume that 10% is assuming short-term battery storage, so no leakage?
When you say leakage of electricity?
Yeah, batteries obviously tend to...
I'm definitely thinking short-term, because I'm not really aware of anybody thinking about batteries for long-term, hours, not days.
Okay. And is there any leakage associated with ammonia? It seems like it would be...
No, I mean, practically not, yeah. What was your second question?
That was it.
Oh, okay.
Some of the barriers I see to developing the technologies and methodologies you've discussed in Jefferson County are it has a small population relatively, so that any commercial development on any scale would have to depend on exporting the product. And the other thing is there are limitations to capital access here in East Jefferson County. We don't have Wall Street, we don't have close connections to Wall Street. And if you're talking of things like ammonia plants and gasification systems, you're talking pretty heavy capital expenditure.
Yes.
And so that means that we have to find a way of importing capital and exporting product.
Yes. That's right. That's exactly right. And that's a good thing. That's all good, right? Because
But is it feasible?
Well, to be determined. That's the work In my consulting days earlier, we did a certain amount of economic development consulting, working from a particular framework, and so I'm, familiar to some degree. And your wealth in a defined jurisdiction is a function of exports of something. Some places it's exports of people into the city and they bring their paychecks back. But in a place like this, that's, I'm sure some people, probably not many, go to Seattle to work. You have the opportunity anyway to export energy. And if you do, that money coming in is directly translates to wealth in the county. As far as capital is concerned, I don't know anything. I don't have confidential information about this, so I hope this is not seen as indiscreet. But do you know who owns the paper mill?
It's owned by some conglomerate, it's a hedge fund.
Hedge fund.
It's an equity investment firm.
They found their way here. If there's money to be made, others will as well. Guarantee it. This is not off the beaten track compared to where a lot of these guys, particularly in the energy world, the big energy projects are in places that are much more exotic than Jefferson County. So
I want to go back to public transportation, which seemed to be a big link in your efforts to reduce greenhouse gases. And the methods you propose involve a large capital investment by cities. I wouldn't say one city could do it, but a whole group of cities could do it. And public transportation is already very heavily subsidized. And so if you're going to pour a lot into it, you'd have to also increase the subsidy. It seems to me a really difficult thing to do politically in the U.S.
Well, you're right. I mean, we did spend a huge amount of time on public transportation and buses in particular. And part of why the hybrid buses in New York City never got down to a price that was particularly affordable is because of the subsidies coming from the Federal Transportation Administration. Huge. Buses in the United States are paid for somewhere between 80-90% by the feds, and the money gets doled out to each transit agency across the land. It would be sort of way presumptuous for me to make any speculation about Jefferson County transit, but there may be something worth looking into there and investigating. And it wouldn't be the first time that a citizens group has lit a fire under a public agency that has its hands full trying to get the buses out of the yard on time in the morning and get them to each stop that it needs to go to during the day, and all of that, and doesn't really feel like it has time to go exploring new technologies. But maybe with some citizen pressure, maybe something like that might be possible.
I got in a little bit late, so I hope I didn't miss something that would have changed this. But I noticed that this is rather national or global, this kind of talk, and it sounds very familiar to me. I'd be really interested, my ears would have really perked up if I'd heard something about decentralized, local, with a goal of reduced road trips and reduced roadway repairs and a whole lot of things that sort of have been hinted at in other places. Surely there are alternative materials. I mean, there's sewage in every community, right? And there's grasses everywhere and all the name your bios and their everythings. Surely decentralized systems would be really a cutting edge way to look at how we are going to economize on energy.
Well, I'm going to sort of intentionally disregard what I hear as the kind of moral dimension of your question, like as in shouldn't we be, and answer it more from a sort of technical perspective. Centralized versus decentralized, when you're talking about expensive assets, you're going to tend to find the trade-off where between those two extremes, centralized and decentralized, somewhere in between, something that's centralized to the right degree or decentralized to the right degree is going to be your lowest cost solution. And since for a lot of these things we're talking about taxpayer funding of the capital investment, that's pretty powerful. And that may mean that you would, at a county level, a county with 28 or 30,000 people, in some theoretical, I don't even know what the thing might be, but you might forego your own version, which would be effectively decentralized, in favor of a lower price or rate for something that was not here, but very economical, and the results of which wound up here. So, like your electricity would be a good example. Getting it from the Bonneville Power Administration with this big centralized plant there on the Columbia River. Decentralized philosophy and say, no, we're gonna generate it all decentrally, but that's going to cost. Your price of electricity will go up a lot if you do that. Chances are.
The other piece, so the other But the other piece of the energy balance sheet that you put into this from circularly is that in each community or each region, there are different sources for these alternatives. And therefore, that locality must play into, rather than shipping the final product over those long borders. That is, if you decentralize to systems that adapt with whatever bios, et cetera, are regional or local.
Yeah, well, if you can afford it, if you choose to afford it, absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you. Help me thank Stephen again for his talk today.